good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. It's always exciting to have a global audience, to be a part of, our international community here at Transcend. So some names that we recognize and some not. So for those who are not familiar with Transcend, we are a global organization, and our mission is to help leaders and organizations adapt and optimize in the face of constant change, which is what we're experiencing right now at its best. So we do this through various ways. We do accredited coach trainings. We also do leadership and organizational development programs, but we also provide professional coaching services, whether it's executive coaching, one-on-one, or with groups and teams. Some of you are familiar with the work that we do. And for those who are not, welcome. And we would love to tell you more about ourselves, and welcome to this chat that we do every month. So it's a monthly leadership chat that we have just to discuss, what is the most salient leadership matters that are going on right now. And we're also here to answer any questions that you may have. So with us today is CEO of Transcend International, Tony, who will facilitate the chat and share his insights as well. And we can begin, Tony. Any words before we start?
So I think it might be useful just if you could just pop in one word into the chat box, which describes how you're arriving today. How are you arriving at this meeting? What is one word that might describe an emotion that might be running right now with you?
And please, when you chat it in, please chat it to all panelists and attendees. Sometimes you just chat it to us as panelists, so we aren't able, the participants aren't able to view what you typed. Right. So here we have happy and positive.
Anything else? Anything else coming in? Interested. Okay. So we've had a little bit of a difficult event, in the last 6 minutes or so while I've been trying to connect with the internet, and maybe some of you still have some form of reaction to that. So if that's there, then please just say that, and we'll check in with you again at the end to see if there's any difference in the condition between now and then. Okay. All right, so we've had excited, we've had happy, we've had interested. So let's move on.
Someone said ready.
Okay. Yeah.
So let's go.
I can see that coming through. So we're now going. Okay, so I'm going to start with another question, because this is on the subject of happiness, and in particular, hopefully, we're going to be talking a little bit about the business case for happiness. Sorry, for kindness, not happiness. There's always a case for happiness, of course. So in terms of setting up this, in terms of what is it that kindness actually brings to us, I want to ask you a question. And again, please use the chat window. What is something that you need, that you think that you need from others in order to be happy? What is something that you need from others in order to be happy? And just put some words into the chat window. What do you need from others in order to be happy? Just in case you couldn't remember the question. Yeah, appreciation is coming in. Anything else? Don't need anything at all? Respect, encouragement, being considerate and positive, gratitude, and quite often we do see words like this. And just here's another question for you, just to keep us moving. What do you think that others need from you in order to be happy? We've had love. What do you think others need from you in order that they may be happy? To be heard. Yeah. Same. Okay. All right. So here is what we tend to see in terms of the answer to this question. So there's a whole bunch of words in here, and I think all of these words have been said by people. And maybe if there's one thing that we really need from others in toto, you can kind of sum it up as kindness. So all of these things really are, you could say, expressions of kindness. Okay. So that is it. So now I want to ask you another question. So imagine that you're in a situation where maybe you've not been at your best, and maybe even you feel that you haven't done a good job about something. And there's of course there's many ways that people can be with you when you haven't shown up at your best. Maybe you've made some mistakes, maybe you have underperformed, perhaps you've even screwed something up. In situations like that, what happens with you when others are kind to you? What happens with you when others are kind to you, as opposed to the opposite, which is maybe moving into hostility or blame or things like this? All right, so you're feeling grateful. So others mention that they feel smiling and they're being optimistic. You become softer yourself. So that's an interesting one. So you may notice that if you have accidentally, because of course you'd never do it on purpose, I know you wouldn't, but let's say that you were accidentally unkind to somebody. Maybe you reacted badly to something they did or said. And the traditional response to somebody being unkind to us is to kind of get triggered and maybe to project unkindness in return. What happens with you if, despite the fact that maybe you were unkind to somebody, or maybe even you feel a little bit hostile with others, if those people are continuously kind with you, what happens? What happens with you? And I'm asking you these questions because, of course, we could just teach all of this stuff because there's a huge amount of science on the benefits to individual well-being, health, etc. of kindness. And there's a lot of research on the business case for kindness. So I could just tell you this stuff, but being a coaching company, of course, primarily, we believe that it's better if you can discover this through your own experience. So what happens to you? So they melt you. So there you are. You're being all hostile and combative, and you're getting unremitting kindness from others, and your hostility is ebbing away. And the way that we might think about this is that when people are kind to us, it helps bring us to our best. So when people are kind to us, there are a whole number of things that actually happen to us from a, if you wish, a neurophysiological perspective. It moves us into what psychologists call an approach state, or it's sometimes called a reward state. And a reward state is a state where we actually have access to all of our resources. We are focused on how we can collaborate. We are focused on being able to access creative resources, and we're able to communicate. So the state of reward is a state where we are looking for creativity, we have access to creative resources, and we're able to collaborate more effectively, and we are generally more likely to be at our best, being able to access all of our resources. On the other hand, the opposite state, and of course from a physical point of view, there are these other benefits, of course, that are very, very useful to us in the context of a number of things, including improved immune system, improved physical and mental well-being. And in particular, what we notice when people are being kind to us is that we are less stressed. It's a very, very interesting phenomenon, and I'll talk about that more in a moment. And very, very good things happen to us when we are not psychologically distressed in the context of us being at our best. Of course, from a health point of view, if we are in a hostile state, then all of those things on the right-hand side would occur, and it's just not useful. And this is just a very, very small snapshot of things that happen to us when we are not feeling kind. We have increased risk of cardiac events. Lots of serious illnesses may emerge, including, by the way, things like autoimmune diabetes, osteoarthritis, and other diseases that are associated with a prolonged inflammatory response increase. It increases your death rate over a period of time. So from a business perspective, I just mentioned to you that kindness is good for business. If you go back to the first webinar that we did, we spoke about part of the job of leadership is especially in difficult situations, a leader's job is to always, moment by moment, be at their best, right? So being at their best means that they're oriented to their values, to their goals, and to, if you wish, the collective benefits of the system, whatever that system is, whether it's the team, the organization, or perhaps the world. So their eye is on that prize, okay? And that is what being at one's best is actually like as a leader. They're always oriented to goals and rewards and values. Now, when part of that, this is often lost, that another job of leadership, as we mentioned a couple of weeks ago, is to behave in a way moment by moment that has others oriented in the same way. So oriented to goals, values, and the collective purpose of the organization. And that is best occurring when we behave as leaders in a way that brings people into what's known as this reward state that I mentioned earlier on, where being at one's best means that one is collaborative, creative, resourceful, and it turns out happier. There's quite a lot of recent research on the science of happiness that really indicates that, you know, what I think people used to believe is that success leads to happiness. And what modern research seems to be indicating, perhaps over the last 15 years, is that happiness is more likely to lead to success. So there is a trade or a link between happiness and success, but it's in the opposite direction to what is traditionally imagined. Okay, I'm just going to stop there, Sam. Anything coming in?
And I just wanted to.
I can't see the chat.
No worries. Can you hear me though?
I can hear you perfectly.
Okay. Well. So just wanted to put some context that, you know, we did send out an email about this, that the theme for this, let's say, leadership chat is initially going to be on kindness. And this is to recognize that May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And the theme for this month is kindness. And for those of you who are in our newsletter list, but also follow us on social media, you've been seeing the content that we've been sharing about kindness and leadership and how they're related, as Tony has elaborated right now. But we just wanted to add some flavor to it, discuss it, and also get your inputs. So let's, you know, as Tony has set up the business case for kindness, especially in a work and leadership context, I guess the question that can follow up after that is, how can I cultivate it as a leader? You know, and I know Tony and I speak about this all the time in the context of our work. How can I as a leader cultivate more kindness? So I think this is something that Tony can share with us.
You know, and cultivating kindness is a non-negotiable strategy to respond to what you might call the VUCA reality, you know, where leaders and their people need to be what we call adaptive. They need to be able to see things as they actually are, noticing what is going on out there, and also noticing what fake news might be running in the mind. Yeah, where fake news tends to be more internal than external. Fake news, you could say, is false appearances to the mind, keeping us entrapped in stories, entrapped in worst case predictions, much of which are not true. We're very, very good at making up worst case scenario predictions when we're in a threat state. So how can we make it less likely that is going to happen? So here's a few tips. I'm going to whack through them quite quickly. The first one is very, very simple. You know, sometimes we say that a smile is the shortest distance between two people. I'm not very good at smiling, actually, and it's not because I don't like to smile. It's because of the shape of my mouth. It just happens to turn down. So I've really got to to be very intentional about smiling. And it's good to be intentional about smiling. Smile more. So
you do smile,
the thing that you will notice about smiling is this, is clearly that when you smile, it creates physiological and hormonal changes. So you could say it creates neuroendocrinological changes within you. So you will release endorphins and other, including dopamine and particularly serotonin. And you'll feel better and you will become less stressed if you put on a real, and we call it a Duchenne smile. So that's smiling not just with your mouth, but also, with your whole face. And as you do so, notice what's happening in your body, or notice a sense of warmth coming through your body. When you smile, it moves you into a less stressed approach state. It changes your state of consciousness. Now, the good news is that the person who is receiving that smile is also adopting through the process of empathy, adopting the same physiology as you are. They're mirroring your physiology without realizing it. So it changes their state of consciousness and helps them to be at their best. At the same time, if there's anybody around that is observing this interaction, then it moves them into a different state of consciousness as well, where they're in an approach state. So not a bad return on investment for just one small, genuine Duchenne smile. So remember that one. So related to that, the next one is warm it up. So what we mean by that is we have been conditioned over the last several years, really, to believe that we need to, especially at work, that we need to adopt a somewhat tough external demeanor. And we tend by default to focus more on competence rather than warmth. And there was a great article by Zender and Folkman on this a few years ago, where they announced a study of around about 350,000 people. And they worked out that success in leadership was more related to emotional intelligence competencies such as kindness, warmth, approachability, and the things that we tend to regard as being warm, than it was competence. Competence is a much overrated leadership quality compared to warmth. So warming it up is something that we need to try to do. Okay, and again, it keeps everybody in this approach state. Creating a kindness compass. So creating a kindness compass is really just contemplating, particularly in difficult contexts of your work and life. Ask yourself this question: how do I want to show up? How do I want to show up as a leader? How do I want to show up as a friend, as a partner? How do I want to show up with people that are giving me a hard time? What does being at my best look like under those circumstances? And how do I need to be so that I'm most likely to bring other people to their best? And we call this, and write this down and reflect on it again and again and again and continue to develop it. This activates part of the brain known as the reticular activating system, which makes it more likely that in the moment of choice, when you might otherwise feel unkind, you're more likely to notice it coming. Oh, I'm noticing that I'm having this sensation of unkindness arising. And you're more likely to remember to act in accordance with your compass. So create a compass, which is the anchor for your attention when things are going wrong, okay? So priming for kindness is simply taking advantage of the fact that our brain is very primable. So priming for kindness really means that if you're going to go into a difficult conversation where you feel that things might go wrong, then take the opportunity to just quickly mentally rehearse before you go in there what might go wrong and how you need to show up in order to be at your best when it does. And that's doing a little bit of priming, okay? I'm going to just skip out kindness journal just for now, because I do want to move on to number 6. Number 6 says, treat it as a practice. Now, if there's anybody out there that knows me well, and Sam, I'm sure you've heard me say this many times before. If you notice yourself getting agitated with somebody and feeling maybe that you've been treated unkindly or without respect, then my advice to you is to treat this as an opportunity to practice kindness. So in terms of your compass, you might have things in there, values in there like being kind, being respectful, being compassionate, being open, which is lovely. except when you notice that people are not being kind to you, they're not being respectful to you, they're not being open with you. And despite the fact that we may have a value of kindness, many of us may be triggered into being unkind when we notice that somebody else is not being kind to us. What we need to do in order to be happy and to bring ourselves and others to their best is to notice that and to bring kindness even into the situations where people are not being kind to you, which is a very, very important practice. So as soon as you notice that you're about to act in a way that might be unkind, see if you can get ahead of it and use it as a trigger or an opportunity to practice kindness. Okay, so that's treating it as a practice. The next one is obviously, you know, our empathy system. The way that it works, sadly, is that we tend to feel kinder and to be more empathic with and compassionate to those that we subconsciously take to be in our tribe. And what that really means is in some way we think that they are like us. They have something in common with us. Well, we all have something in common with each other. We're all in it together, trying to be happy in our own way. So the choices that we make about who has something in common with us are just, they're often made subconsciously. And we have a moment, if we notice that we are just about to be biased or unkind to somebody that might be in our out group, then we have the opportunity to notice what it is about that person that we can actually share. And we are likely then to see things differently in terms of the input that we're receiving from that person. Okay, I'm just going to stop because we've only got 4 minutes left. And I want to just check in to see if there's any questions.
A couple of questions came in, actually. And we can, you know, we recognize that we started late, so we can finish 5 or 10 minutes afterwards if people are willing to stay in. So this first question is from Arn. How can leaders identify kindness versus softness? Because many mix up the two.
This is a beautiful question, and because a lot, and this is the big objection around kindness, of course, is that people worry that they're going to be a pushover. And how do you avoid being kind and yet avoid being a pushover? And the way to look at this is to use kindness wisely. So, for example, let's say that you have to give a tough message to somebody. That is not an unkind act. You know, you may have to give difficult feedback to somebody. You may even have to let somebody go. And you may, if you have a kind orientation, you may feel that that is unkind. Well, that's really indulging your own, you know, it's really about you, that you're not able to do what is necessary for the bigger picture, for the wider system. If you're not giving tough feedback to this individual, then maybe they can't grow, they can't develop, so therefore they're going to have trouble all the way through. And so the idea is to see the difficult feedback as being an act of kindness. To see that if you have to let somebody go, then that may appear to be unkind to that individual, but they will be okay. And the fact that your company will survive because you've taken that action means that you have been kind to everybody else. So it's a very, very interesting thing. We sometimes talk about kindness as being like a soft, approachable, cuddly belly, a soft front, but a stiff, resilient, principle-centered, value-oriented back. There's one other thing to say about that. I think it was Arnie that asked the question. That is, if it's about, if you know that the conversation, if you believe that what it is that you're about to say to somebody is in service of just making you feel better in the moment, then that is likely to be unkind. If it's in service of the development and the growth of the other person or the system at large, then even though it may be difficult, then it would still, you could still frame it as an act of kindness. Does that make sense to whoever asked the question?
To Arnie, let's see. Yes.
Somebody said yes, thanks. Yes. Okay, Arnie said yes, thanks. Okay, so it's all about the mindset. Next question.
So we have two more questions. So this one is coming from Christina. How to support clients in a state of fear? fear
right.
of rocking the boat and creating change.
Okay, so what we do is, of course, is to help a person firstly notice the storylines that might be running their mind. Okay, what is it that they are currently subject to? And see if we can help them to build the competence of noticing how they might get stuck in these storylines that we call fake news or fears, false expectations which appear real, born of normally rumination and making predictions of disaster, which generally are not true. Sometimes, one can say, the mantra that I quite like is that it'll all work out in the end, and if it doesn't, then actually it's not the end. There's always the next moment, the next day. But people don't see this as a psychological resource for them when they're in fear. So what we need to help them to do is to actually feel their fear. Feel it, and rather than be it. So notice it, notice where it is in the body, notice in the present moment what's happening in the mind, put a little bit of space around it. And then with that space, insert what is it that they really care about right now? What goals can they set which might help them to be at their best, despite the fact that they may have been dealt a very, very difficult hand of cards? Yes, I've got a difficult hand of cards. How can I play that hand to the best of my ability? And keeping people oriented on what is it that they can do in this moment that leads them in a slightly longer term to a direction that might be productive, that might help them to move towards something that they value or a goal that they have or that they can set. Does that help, Christina? In other words, help people to keep their eye on the prize is what I like to say sometimes about this.
And Christina typed in, yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so one more question, and this comes from Marion. Tony, what is your definition of empathy? And according to you, how does it relate to kindness?
I'd say, okay, so empathy, I think so there's many definitions of all of these things. And the way that we look at it is that empathy is simply the ability to feel with and experience what others are experiencing emotionally. So to notice and experience what others are experiencing. Okay. Kindness is simply the intention to be of service to others, or perhaps you could say to be of benefit to self and others. And I mentioned self on purpose because we have to be kind to ourselves, of course, as part of all of this. If we're not looking after ourselves, then we cannot be of service to others. So we must not forget that. And it's easy to say, and it's actually less easy to do. So the main difference between empathy and kindness is empathy is really experiencing the emotions of others. Compassion, by the way, which is also related, is the ability to experience the emotions of others and then to notice them in the present moment rather than getting caught up in their flow. Notice them in the present moment and then generate an aspiration to help with that person's suffering. Kindness is simply the intention that you will form that others will be happy. So it's almost like saying to yourself, may you be happy when you're in front of others, right? And orienting in that direction. Does that make sense, Marion? Okay, thank you.
Absolutely, yes. Great. And thank you for everyone who has stayed so far.
I'd like to do the check-in if it's okay. Before we go, Sam, remember to do the final word check-in.
Yeah, and maybe just before that, Tony, just as a reminder for people who have stayed, we are doing this every month. This is one way we'd like to share with you and just have a conversation with you about these important topics. And it's very heartwarming for me that actually kindness and empathy and compassion has come up as important matters, especially in a leadership context where people might think that it's a hard thing to do, right? So very great to be doing this, and I feel, Tony, we're on the right path as well.
Well, I hope so. We hope to be of service here in whatever way we can. Now, a question came in from, I think it may have been Dariana. that there was a statement that, or a question: does empathy lead to compassion, or is empathy related to compassion? And I think the thing to say about that is it is probable that empathy is a precondition for compassion. So there's been quite a lot of neurological studies on the difference between empathy and compassion, and they do have a different neural signature. That's what compassion, empathy has a signature which is quite painful often, especially where the emotion is afflictive, where it's a negative emotion. So there's activation in the insular cortex, the anterior cingulate cortex, in case you're interested in that stuff. The anterior cingulate is the sort of like error processing center of the brain. So when we have physical pain, it shows up in the anterior cingulate cortex. When we see others' pain, it also shows up in the anterior cingulate cortex. Compassion has the additional signature of self-management, which exists in the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. And self-management is this: I'm noticing the other's emotion, and yes, I'm actually feeling it, and ouch, it is perhaps painful, but I'm able to notice and put some space around it and experience it in the present moment rather than being caught up in it. So that, because if I'm caught up in your emotion and experiencing it the way that you do, in an uncontained way, then I can't actually help you, because I've got the same issue as you have, right? I'm also being swept along in the emotion. So I need not to be swept along in the emotion if I'm going to be able to help. Now, the other thing about compassion, which is different, is that there's a signature in the motor cortex, which is kind of around the top of the skull. And the signals there are the beginnings of the intention, the movement towards doing something to help, right? So you could argue that compassion equals empathy plus a lot of other stuff, which is around self-regulation and intention to help. Has that helped, Ariana? If you're still there. Okay, good, thank you. Thanks.
So Tony, we can do the check-in, check-out, check-in.
Okay. All right, so let's have from you, if possible, a word that describes how you feel right now. Whatever you want to put in. Grateful, thank you.
There's inspired, grateful.
Okay. There's a couple of people who haven't put in the to everybody. There's a few people saying aware. A couple of gratefuls have come in, not to everybody. Joy of learning, that's lovely. That's lovely. And I strongly, please do your best to notice others. So the kindness journal really, which I didn't really talk about, is about noticing and writing down your reflections on when you have noticed kindness either being applied to you, being applied between others, when you have been kind, just noticing what happened, what was the trajectory of it, where did it lead, and how did you feel? It's very, very important to reflect on how we felt about something, because that's where the learning is. We often believe that we're going to feel terrible about things, and that is what creates unhelpful impulses. We believe, many of us have this autopilot that kindness is a bad strategy because it means that we're going to be taken advantage of. That is only true if you don't have the courage to bring a kind orientation to a difficult situation. Making it not just only about you, but about something bigger than you, even if it means you have to be tough. You know, I quite like the expression ruthless compassion. You've probably heard it before, where you can be tough and yet kind at the same time. Okay, and this is a beautiful thing to be able to cultivate if you can only do it. Okay. Oh, you can watch the video, of course. There's a bit more detail on a video that I prepared, I think, a couple of weeks ago, which I think Sam either has or will send to you. There's a bit more detail on there.
Yeah, and please do follow us on social media. We have a channel on LinkedIn and Facebook, and there's also a mailing list that you can be a part of. So please send us an email if you want to be part of all that. but you should be receiving any follow-up emails. So thank you very much, everyone, and see you next month.
Thank you. Hope you enjoyed.